Hi, I'm Femi Okay.
I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today, non-polar glaciers are disappearing. Is it too late to preserve them? We will look at Pakistan and other parts of the world you might not associate with fields of ice. When we talk about glaciers, it's usually in reference to the polar regions, but today we're focusing on Pakistan and how the melting of glaciers there and in other regions is impacting the people who live close to them.
And that's because this was a topic suggested to us by one of our online community members in Pakistan. Take a look at this Facebook comment where Junaid writes, Pakistan is home to one of the largest glaciers in the north, which are melting at a high rate and causing huge damage. Our food security is in danger, and this issue rarely gets media attention. As a result, there's a lack of awareness on how to deal with it. So, of course, we want to hear from you on this. If you live near a non-polar glacier, we want you to be part of this conversation. Send us your pictures or your thoughts on today's discussion with hashtag AJStream.
So as Junaid already mentioned, Pakistan's north is home to some of the world's largest glaciers outside of the polar regions. But some of the country's ice masses are melting at a record pace that's far from glacial. For Pakistan, melting glaciers have big consequences, including greater potential for extreme weather, flooding, drought, food insecurity and migration. So in this show, we will look at Pakistan and the state of glaciers in other countries. What can we learn from ice masses and why do they matter to humans and the environment? So with us to talk about all of this in Islamabad, Aisha Khan, CEO of the Mountain and Glacier Protection Organization. She's also Executive Director of the Civil Society Coalition for Climate Change. Musunda Mumba is a program coordinator with the United Nations Environment Programme based in Nairobi, Kenya. In Kathmandu, Nepal, Dhananjay Regmi is a mountain geomorphologist and environmental activist. And Andrew Fountain is a glaciologist at Portland State University in the US state of Oregon. Welcome, everybody. It's good to have you. Little Stream Science Club going on here. Let me show you a tweet from Fatima Ansari. Well, not many people know that there are glaciers in Pakistan. Most believe that it's a desert inhabited by Bedouin nomads. Let me share you something with you from Dr. Yasser. This is a glacier on the way up to Ali Camp during Gondogoro LA trek. And one more. I mean, look at this picture. This is beautiful. Pakistan, visit Pakistan, beautiful Pakistan. Let me just show you one more here from Khalid, hashtag beautiful Pakistan. This is a glacier that's 10 kilometers long near Gondogoro Glacier in Gilgit-Baltistan, Pakistan. Aisha, you have been trekking up in the mountains of Pakistan. When you get there, what do you see? What is it like?
It's a beautiful piece of land over there. It's primordial, absolutely. And I've been trekking in that region for almost 20 years now. So I think I can say safely that I'm first-hand witness to the impacts of climate change. And as you've already said yourself, that it has the largest and the densest collection of glaciers outside the polar regions. And we're getting affected by climate change. There's also been some conversation about the Karakoram glaciers being stable. Now, there's a little bit of a difference between upper ablation glaciers and lower altitude glaciers. The upper, which are above 4,000 meters, are usually stable, but the lower ones are melting. And I think the fact that we have an increase in the number of glacial lakes from 35 to almost 50 now is proof that there is global warming and it is affecting our glaciers. And they are melting and they are affecting the lives, assets and livelihoods of our communities who live there upstream and both downstream.
Musunda, let me show you this picture of you.
So my understanding is,
yes, Andrew,
if I may break in here.
Yeah, please.
This is Andrew. The glaciers on the west side of the Himalaya over by Pakistan are getting a little bit more snow than on the east side, further by India. That might be nourishing them a little bit more. Is that true?
I think, I draw a distinction between the Himalayan glaciers and the Karakoram glaciers, because to me, these are two different mountain ranges and two distinct ecosystems. So the Himalayan ones are also melting and the Karakoram ones are melting less, but only at the upper levels.
So here's what I'm thinking here. Masunda, this is a picture of you. This is a picture of you up in the mountains of Uganda, looking pretty intrepid, bundled up. Somebody who's watching, say, in Cape Town is like, why should I care? Why should I care about this? And you would say what?
Well, they should. That was a trip I took in 2008 when I used to work for World Wildlife Fund. And it was the most fascinating expedition because I was the only woman that made it to the summit. And for me, what was the most intriguing was the fact that for the first time as an African woman, I get there and I realize, oh my goodness, smack in the middle of the equator, there are these glacial systems. And what prompted us really was that, and I think, unlike obviously, you know, from Aisha's case and possibly my other counterparts here, unlike many, you know, other parts of the world, the African region has very discrete mountain systems. So we have got Kilimanjaro, obviously, which is very famous. We've got Mount Kenya, and I living in Kenya. It's a very beautiful area. So they're all sort of rather discrete and rather not connected to each other. However, for the entire continent, all the water systems come from highland mountain regions. So obviously somebody in Cape Town might say, well, I don't care. Well, we are all connected to these systems, either climatically or even from a water perspective. In fact, a number of the water resources are transboundary. So let's just talk about the Nile system, for instance. The Ruwenzori mountain waters contribute to the Nile system that has well over 400 million people in its catchment. That's a lot of people depending on this water.
So I want to show some evidence of what melting glaciers looks like for our audience. So take a look here at my computer. These are pictures provided to us by our own stream digital producer, Noor Ibrahim. This is Ultar. It's a glacier that's overlooking the Karimabad Valley in northern Pakistan. Now, she hiked up to the edge of the glacier. You can see that in this next picture here. And she was told by locals that over the last 20 years, the glacier had receded. And the portions of the trail where she was hiking on used to be submerged in ice, and it's that water that is needed to supply the local town. So you see on one hand why it's needed, but here's this tweet from Professor DeShelby who says, I live in Thailand and all of the glaciers here have melted already. So should I buy a smaller car to save the planet? Clearly it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek there, Dhananjay, but he's not convinced. His glaciers are gone already. So what would you say to him?
Well, you know, just by buying a small car, he cannot just get back the, you know, glacier back, or he cannot contribute too big to save the Himalayan or other glaciers in the world. But, you know, I just want to go back a little bit in the ISA's statement, because Pakistan glaciers are a little bit complicated. I did some of my research in the Pasu area and in above the Gilgit, and in Pasu there is a glacier where I saw people were making an irrigation channel every year, and next year they find that the glacier is moving more forward, and their last year channel, the irrigation channel, is already crossed by the glacier, and they make a new channel in the next year, or in a year or two. In every alternative 2-3 years they have to make a new channel, and the glacier has touched almost the Karakoram highway. And I heard that it has touched once and blocked even the Karakoram highway for some time. So, you know, for me, Himalayan glaciers in Nepal, Himalaya, they are mostly retreating. But in the Karakoram, especially in the Pakistan, there is a lot of, in my own eyewitness, I see them, you know, moving forward instead of retreating much. Even in the Pasu area is not at very high altitude. It is around 2,800, 3,000 meters.
Let me show you something. Let me show you something, Guess. This is Al Jazeera correspondent Malcolm Webb, who reported from the Stanley Glacier, which is in Uganda, up in the mountains of Uganda. And so when we're trying to make that connection between melting glaciers and what it might happen and do to people who are actually living in the communities around them, Malcolm made that connection. Have a look.
Over there on the rock is a mark of blue paint. That was made by the Uganda Wildlife Authority 3 years ago, showing the level of ice and snow. So you can see how much the glacier has melted since then. In a village down the mountain, we met a man who remembers the glaciers when they were even bigger. Zedekir Bayeni started guiding people up in 1949. Now he's 82 years old. He says he used to ski down them.
Skiing was really a lot of fun. There was so much snow that skiing was very easy when the snow was fresh. We would ski from 6 a.m. to midday and see amazing views on all sides.
So, Andrew, Zendekia's skiing days are over, but if we're looking at that real impact on the glaciers melting and then what actually happens literally down on the ground, what would be the most compelling case that you could share with us?
Well, there's, you know, the melting glaciers definitely provide water flow during certain parts of the year, obviously not so much in the wintertime in the northern hemisphere. That's actually a little bit different for the Karakoram glaciers, which have their summer season and the greatest snowfall at the same time. But in many cases, glaciers elsewhere outside of Pakistan and India, you know, the glaciers are more indicators of what's happening, such that if we have smaller glaciers, we have less snowfall. And for those of us in the U.S., in Canada, in Europe, less snowfall means less water because a lot of our seasonal storage is in the snowfall. So you have direct glacier reaction, and you have what it implies for high alpine water resources.
And I just want to add something to what Andrew's saying, actually. Obviously, glaciers globally have been labeled as sentinels of change. And what that means is they're actually indicative of what's actually happening in the global climate. And I think we need to be cognizant of this because clearly we're seeing how they're retreating. I mean, the case in point was this work that we were doing in Uganda that really demonstrated that the scientists that went there in 1955, for example, came and you know, took pictures, and we went back in 2008, the exact same time that they'd gone there. In less than 60 years, there was already a retreat. So already they're indicating that there's quite a substantive change that's happening, and that is, you know, really a cause for concern.
Mm. So I hear you talk about that change. I want to play this video comment from Jessica, and then I'll give it to you, Aisha. Jessica is an assistant professor of geography at Miami University, and I think she's linking what we just heard to real-world implications. Have a listen.
The Himalayan glaciers are the main water source for over 1.5 billion people. Due to climate change and the deposition of short-lived climate pollutants like black carbon, these glaciers are melting at unprecedented rates, which has implications for drinking water, water conflicts, and food security, including availability for irrigation and declining water for wild food sources for humans and wildlife.
So Aisha, not everyone might necessarily think of food, drinking water when they think of melting glaciers. Can you explain how those two things are related and why that matters?
There's a direct connection because, you know, let's talk a little bit about precipitation and snowfall timing. That has also changed as a result of the climate change and global warming. So what we're seeing in our north, where we have our glaciers, is that snow no longer falls in October, November as it used to. It now falls in late February, which means the volume of snow is less and the melting is accelerated. So we have shortage of water. As a country, we are a water-starved country. So that's creating massive problems for us because we are an agrarian economy. We depend our rural populations, the majority that lives in the hinterlands and in rural areas, depends on agriculture for its sustenance. So when there is lack of water or little water or a shift in the timing and flow patterns of water, it disrupts life systems. So it affects our social indicators, it affects our economy. We also produce a large amount of electricity through hydel projects. So that also is water dependent. So water is very closely linked to food and energy. And therefore, you know, for us, it's very important to have water in the right quantity and at the right time. We also have, you know, the precipitation from the monsoon rains, but unfortunately our storage capacity is very small. We don't have storage capacity beyond 30 days. And some of the water that comes into Pakistan is transboundary, so it originates either in India or in Afghanistan. And to add to that, we have a single river irrigation system. So when there is too little water, large segments of the population get affected. When there's too much water, there is flooding, there is damage, there's loss of life, assets, livelihoods,
Sure.
and we have to take care of that.
So let's talk about adaptation.
This highlights a very good point, if I can break in here,
Yeah, go ahead,
and that
Andy.
is that what she said about natural storage capacity, that we have natural storage capacity in terms of snowfall and snowpack accumulation, which accumulates in the winter and then melts during the summer, and then the same thing with glaciers on a longer term basis. So it's that natural storage capacity that's critical, that when we lose that because of the shift of precipitation from snow to rain, we might have the same amount of rainfall, but precipitation, but when it shifts from snow to rain, now we have to create artificial storage capacity that's not only expensive, and it may or may not be doable.
All right, so guests, you've loaded us down with the issues. Get it. I'm on board with this. Let's talk about adaptation. Masunda,
Yes.
in 2008, you came across a man who had malaria. He didn't know he had malaria. Will you tell that full story for us? Because it's remarkable.
Indeed. So I went to Uganda with a team, and as we were, walking around in Fort Portal, which is the town in the foot of Rwenzori Mountain, I was just, talking to women in the fields and talking to men and children, and I came across this nearly 80-something-year-old man. And as we were talking and laughing, he's asking me, why are you going up the mountain? So I'm explaining to him why we were going up the mountain, to look at, the changes that had happened and, why these changes had happened, etc. And he then started telling me the story of how he had had malaria for the first time. Now, mind you, as a lot of people might have heard, in a lot of high elevation areas of Africa, there in highland regions, there is no malaria simply because of the cool temperatures, and the mosquitoes cannot get up there. However, the changes in the temperatures, this is something that has happened in the Mount Kenya area. This is something that happened in Rwenzori. I mean, this man told me and said, I thought I had the flu and I wasn't sure what was going on. And then, the nurse told me that you had malaria, and I just didn't understand, because this is something that we get when we are in Kampala. And as you know, Kampala is a wetland system, low-lying area. Of course, there are mosquitoes there. And it was really shocking for me, because I suddenly, for me being a Zambian, I had malaria many times growing up in Zambia. But here's a man who had never experienced this, indicatively saying that change has happened. So how do we then adapt to this change? And what really that demonstrated to me is the holistic nature of ecosystems. So now health systems, or health mechanisms, now have to start taking into account these communities that, may not have had or had been exposed to certain diseases that never, they experienced before. So already, mountain regions are changing so quickly that we're getting, communities are getting exposed to diseases, pests or other plights that they just never ever experienced.
And so we actually got a comment from someone explaining why those effects that you're talking about, the climate change effects, what that has to do with melting glaciers. This is Mike McFerrin. He's a glaciologist, and this is what he told the stream.
It's like an insurance policy. In the very hottest, driest summers, the glaciers will run off the most. In fact, have the highest flow levels during the hottest times of the year when people need them most. In the cooler summers, when it's not melting as much, they'll regain some of that mass. And those are summers where they don't need the glaciers as much. So when you start to eliminate the glaciers, what happens is you're leaving communities more up to the mercy of the interannual fluctuations between hot and cooler summers, and it takes more infrastructure to help remediate that.
So Dhananjay, he says glaciers are an insurance policy. So what can local communities do to ensure that they still have that policy?
Well, I would like to talk on mostly on this, like the glaciers are melting, but at the same time, glaciers they are just melting and they are not disappearing. They are creating another threat. As far as they are as a glacier is still there in the mountains, they are melting slowly, but since the Himalayan glaciers or elsewhere the glaciers are melting fast, big glacial lakes are forming, which are becoming bigger and bigger every year, and they are becoming a more big threat to the people instead of insurance or something. Well, there is a lot of water, but until and unless we really don't understand them very clearly, and find a way to properly use the water, we lose the glaciers, but we have a lot of water still in the glacial lakes. And if we can identify the way to properly use it, either for the hydropower or for the irrigation or for some other utilities, that will give assurance to the people for the better use or to fulfill their needs. In Nepal,
Dhananjay, I'm glad you brought that up because we just got this tweet. We got this tweet from Iqbal who says, what is the evidence? Smaller glaciers may be melting, but larger ones may be expanding as per some reports. Not sure about actual status. So this person is referencing what you were saying about some are melting, some are expanding. Andrew, could you clear that up for us?
Oh, well, it's not a 50-50 deal. It's glaciers globally are receding. There are a few in the Hindu Kush area that are advancing, but that's fairly small compared to the large overall global picture. So there's no doubt whatsoever that we're losing our glaciers slowly but surely, and maybe that's accelerating in the last couple of decades. So
Andrew,
that's kind of just a local issue.
Sure, Andrew, I want to show our audience something, and this is something that Dhananjay, you were talking about, which is basically a glacial lake and a potential for a glacial lake to flood. Have a look at this video from the United Nations. It goes back to 1994 to a huge flood that happened in Bhutan from a glacial lake. Have a look.
The Himalayan meltdown is creating hundreds of high-altitude lakes which contain massive amounts of water. At any moment, an earthquake or avalanche could trigger a glacial lake outburst flood, obliterating all in its path.
Dhananjay, this is the kind of work that you're trying to focus on, which is how do you warn communities who live around these melting glaciers? How do you warn them that the glacial lake that's forming could be incredibly dangerous? What are you doing?
Well, yeah, so what we started to teach the people that what sort of threat, what sort of big glacial lakes are forming above their settlements. So we are doing mostly the satellite image analysis, and we are disseminating all these knowledge with the local peoples who are living in the downstreams. And at one side, at another side, from the government support, we are trying to lower down the very big lake which are really in danger, which can burst out any time.
So you're looking at pictures, Dhananjay, I just want to make sure I understand you. You're looking at pictures, so in the satellite pictures, how will you know when a lake is about to burst, just from the satellite?
No, we cannot understand it is going to burst right now, but we can see how fast they are growing. When they are growing very fast, then we go to the mountains and we do the bathymetric, try to understand the total volume of water, and then looking at the terminal moraine, which hold all the water, the strength of the terminal moraine, and we say that...
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
Can I just add something to what you're saying? You know, I've been fortunate enough to work in Nepal with the teams from USMAN, which is the intergovernmental body looking at the Himalayan region there. And I must say, just adding on to what Dhananjay is saying, from UN Environment, obviously, we've been collaborating with a number of partners to get a better understanding. Now, that glacier burst, I mean, people have had to be warned at least, you know, either days ahead because there's a disaster coming, and how do you manage that particular disaster? And I must mention that I'm really impressed with some of the work that has been done in that region in terms of disaster preparedness. And some of that warning is done through digital space. Send text messages to a wide range of communities. I mean, imagine how many people have text messages in terms of warning. Be aware that this is going to happen, and should you move, should you not move? And I really would like to hear more from him whether this has worked or it hasn't worked in terms of, you know, early warning and also preparedness at the community level, because we really have to work collectively.
Well, in Everest region, there is a lake called the Imja Glacier Lake, which was one of the was on the list of the very top priority, looking at its the danger for the downstream community, because if it burst out, almost like 90,000 people are supposed to be affected by that.
Dhananjay, so we have less than a minute left. I'm just going to ask you in a sentence, just to answer Masunda's question, if you're able to, just very quickly, in a sentence. Go ahead.
Yeah, the 90,000, to save the 90,000 people, we have established the warning system, first thing. Second, we lower down the glacier lake itself by 3.4 meter. And now the water level is low enough and it is safe for at least coming 20-25 years. This is what we have recently done.
Andrew, Dhananjay, Masunda and Aisha, we're out of time. Such a big topic, so little time to talk about it. Malika, how's this gone down online?
Ahmed gives a suggestion for what one province in Pakistan is doing, planting 1 billion trees to arrest climate change.
I'm going to leave you with this picture of the Mendenhall Glacier in Alaska. Thanks for watching, everybody.